No, not yet. Had to get my mic on.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Welcome. Good morning. Getting used to the new 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock time frame. We have a couple of announcements. One, Chris Davis texted me or emailed me this week and wanted me to announce that he's working on a DVD for Camp Laverne. It's a Camp Laverne documentary. And he's got a link that'll be in next week's announcements to help support his documentary. He has about 16 days left to be able to get the financial backing for the documentary, and he's inviting us to take part in that if we'd like. So look to either check with me after worship and I can email it to you today, or it'll be present next week in our announcements. And we can support Chris and Camp Laverne in that way. Yesterday we had the second work day for Casa de Luz, who is building the cottage number 1 down here. I didn't get any pictures or videos yesterday, so you're just gonna have to walk down and see how it's done. They've got doors on, I think, and windows in, and the roof on, and that little cottage will end up somewhere to provide housing. No plumbing in it, just a shell. So, but it will find itself someplace in San Diego, and the trainers that they're training will participate in the building of the other homes in the San Diego area. What other? Today is our congregational business meeting at 1 o'clock. The board decided we would do that again on Zoom, so you should have received a link. I believe it went out on the 1st. So feel free to join us at that link at 1 o'clock today so that we can be a part of a community and take care of our business together. Let's see. During worship today, this is our visual that we'll be working with, and there will be a time to interact and engage with our text via arts. We have several different art stations, recognizing that we are physically distanced. We might be able to have some sit at the table if you'd like, but there's some clipboards with an art piece there. We have pencils, colored pencils here, and we have colored pastels, pastel oil and oil pastels over there. And then you'll be able to move wherever you want throughout the building and engage the text in art. So that's a little different. As we began our summer series last week. It's called Faces of Faith. This booklet is available. You're welcome to bring it throughout and use it during worship if you'd like. As you can see, I've been coloring and note-taking and all sorts of things through the week as we engage our texts each week with that. What other announcements do we want to make? I'm sure the 27th, Sunday afternoon, the 27th, between 3 and 5, we'll be gathering down in the gathering place. The agreement that we had was that we would use that space until June for our asylum seeking program, and then in June it would revert back to a classroom. And as we continue to open up cautiously, that building will return to a children's kind of room, and it will be used during the week, some for children's activities for our asylum seekers, and also for the apostolics as they gather back together. Judy, did you have an announcement? I just saw the hand. It was probably.
Oh, okay, well, if we could get 4 people to help take down the canopies right after worship, that would be great.
All right, canopy collapsing as we move. And hopefully that won't take too much time because we do have the congregational business meeting that we need to.
Yeah, like 10 minutes or something.
Okay. All righty. Other announcements. I think I also would like to take the opportunity at this point to share our challenge. No, we'll create our space. Then we'll do that. Okay. Today, as we gather, we're gathering in this space, and as we move through our time together here in worship, we will breathe together, we will hear spoken word, we will share in song, we will pray, and we will reflect together in art. It is an interactive Lectio Divina type style worship. You will notice in your program the 4 R's of Lectio, and we will be moving through those throughout our time together. I invite us to bring ourselves fully here, leaving at the door those things that are distracting and taking some time to create a sacred space and invite God to be with us and for us to be with God as we come together in worship. I invite us to breathe together as we are sharing in our book study in the morning. We're becoming aware of body space and ourselves in the spaces that we find ourselves. One of the things that connects us to God is breath. Breath is that life-giving experience. And in our text this morning and in the creation story, we hear of God's breath giving life. So as we come to this time of breathing together, I'm going to suggest a methodology. I'm going to invite us to bring our hands, oops, move the glasses, bring our hands in prayer to our chest. And then the next motion will be, as we breathe in, our prayers will be lifted to the heavens. And then as we exhale, we will bring our hands to the side and bring them down, opening our heart space to God and to the indwelling of the Spirit. So it'll be inhale, and then returning to prayer. Let's do that together 3 times. Inhale. That breath connects us to God. It invites us to a time of sharing our prayers, lifting our joys, our challenges, our gratitudes to God, and sharing them with each other in the community. So what challenge do you, gratitude.
Singing and Nonviolence workshop that started yesterday and goes through June.
Gratitude. All right. Other gratitudes. I would have a gratitude for the building that's going on here on campus. You probably have, I don't know, 20 or 30 people that come on campus for that. Gratitude. Kara.
I start my new job tomorrow, so that's very exciting. I do have a concern as well. My neighbors, as well as my sister, both lost their dogs this week. And that's been very challenging for both households. So
All right, so
your thoughts would be great.
New job and pets, dogs crossing the Rainbow Bridge. Warren.
Gratitude for this beautiful space on this beautiful campus. And gratitude that we have a tithe jar as an offering jar because we're not fasting. I found a beautiful jar to put our money.
There you go. Sharing that stewardship for this campus, these ministries that we share. Linda.
Yes, Pastor Sarah and I were talking about who would be wonderful to have as counselors in training for the peace camp. And we got yeses from 3 out of 3.
All right,
So,
yay!
yay! That's definitely exciting. And I would also say, and just kind of as a shorthand, if Judy could write caring and capable kids.com, no spaces. My gratitude is that Dana Brown, our mutual friend, some of us, had an intern from San Diego State do the techno wizardry of creating a landing page. I didn't even know what a landing page is, and I still can't explain it, but it's something that's wonderful in being able to share the resources, the songs, and the Think and Share invitations that I put together to try to be a blessing to children and youth and families and educators in these wonky times especially. So, if y'all wanna, enjoy, explore on the website and share with others at will, that'd be awesome. Under the challenges, I would say the amount of gun violence that we are hearing about is just so heartbreaking. And, praying for God to heal the troubled souls that are causing the harm. And on a happier note, although under a concern sometimes, is safe travels for Jake as he returns from Chicago. I'm not sure what day that is, but finishing up his time there.
Great, all right. Well, thank you for sharing those joys and those concerns. Our whole service this morning is really a prayer. Prayer is a conversation with God. Prayer is speaking, talking, and listening to God. So today, we're going to experience a text that's very common. We're going to experience through Lectio Divina. I enjoy Lectio. It gives me a chance to settle in and rest with a text. And our text today is a familiar one. One that we have probably encountered every year as we come to God. It's the text in Genesis. We will share in a time of reading a text, then we take some time to reflect, and then we take time to respond, then we take time to rest. We will be doing this with song. We'll start out with "Come and Fill Our Hearts with Your Peace." It is in your program. And then we will read the text. And our sermon series, I think, invites us to think about this Adam and Eve text. It's the text of Adam and Eve and the creation that takes place in the garden. And I think oftentimes we think about that creation in terms of male and female. We think of, often that text is used to try and help understand how males and females are supposed to relate, or and how world was created. One of the things our author invites us to think about in our study journal this week is a little bit different. The focus, as you can see on your bulletin, is "At last, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." And our author invites us to think of it perhaps a little differently. It's shared in our journal in these words. What amazes me most about this story is Adam's response. It would be so human of Adam to focus on their differences, to be hesitant in his welcome, or to act superior for being made first. However, instead of focusing on their differences, Adam immediately celebrates their connection. It's as if Adam says, "At last, I have been waiting for someone to belong to, and even though we look different, we are made from the same God. So you and I, we belong together." I wonder just how different this world would be if we saw strangers and friends like Adam sees Eve. You, the refuge. You, the refugee. you, the convict, you who is black or white, old or young, gay or straight, you are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. You and I, we belong together. May we never forget it. I invite you to think on those words that kind of shape this text a little differently as we begin our time together. Let's share in our song, our beginning song, Confitemini Domino. Let's share in the English, and let's sing just the English verse maybe 3 times through. And in the repetition, and it almost comes to that point of chanting, a breath together and the singing together. It's repetitious, and that is for a reason, to get in touch with your breath, to get in touch with God, and to allow the words to shape our time together. As you hear this familiar scripture, as we read through it our first time, I invite you to get a sense of what it's saying. Consider the art piece that's on your program. Look at it. How does this text come alive? Listen for the words or phrases that strike you. And as you listen not only with your ears, but with your heart. Hear now this story of creation. This is the story of how it all started. Of heaven and earth when they were created. At the time, God made earth and heaven. Before any grasses or shrubs had sprouted from the ground, God hadn't yet sent rain on earth. Nor was there anyone around to work the ground. The whole earth was watered by underground springs. God formed man out of dirt from the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life. The man came alive, a living soul. Then God planted a garden in Eden, in the east. God put the man he had just made in it. And God made all kinds of trees grow from the ground. Trees beautiful to look at and good to eat. The tree of life was in the middle of the garden. also the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And God took the man and set him down in the Garden of Eden to work the ground and keep it in order. God commanded the man, "You can eat from any tree in the garden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat from it. The moment you eat from that tree, you're dead." God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I'll make him a helper, a companion." So God formed the dirt of the ground, from the dirt of the ground, all of the animals of the field and all of the birds of the air. And he brought them to the man to see what he would name them. Whatever the man called the living creature, that was its name. The man named cattle, named the birds of the air, named the wild animals. But he didn't find a suitable companion. God put the man into a deep sleep. And as he slept, God removed one of his ribs and replaced it with flesh. God then used the rib that he had taken from the man to make woman and presented her to the man. And the man said, "Finally, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Name her woman, for she was taken from man." Therefore, a man leaves his father and mother and embraces his wife, and they become one flesh. The two of them, the man and his wife, were naked, but they felt no shame. As you have heard that text, I invite you to take a moment to think what words might have come. What hearing did you have? What strikes you as you listen to that text? There is a piece of paper in your bulletin. You have a pen or a pencil, you're welcome to take that and journal on it. And if that doesn't quite feel a way to connect, there's blank paper over on that side with pastel crayons, and there's colored pencils and the image over here. Feel free to sit around the table as you're comfortable, or take a picture that's on the clipboard and think about what this story says to you in its first reading. We'll have several minutes to think and to consider. biblical story comes alive for us as it connects to our lives. The Bible is amazing, but if it doesn't connect to our lives, if it doesn't connect to our faith, if our faith doesn't connect to it, it has little meaning. So as I read this passage for a second time, and as you think about what you have been given, what you have taken from this first reading, consider if there is a word or a phrase or a meaning that particularly speaks to your life right now. What is it in this text that comes alive and connects to your life? This is a story of how it all started, of heaven and earth, and how they were created. At the time God made heaven and earth, before any grasses or shrubs had sprouted from the ground, God hadn't yet sent rain on the earth, nor was there anyone around to work the ground. The whole earth was watered by underground springs, and God formed man out of the dirt and blew into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living soul. Then God planted a garden in the east. And he put the man that he had just made in it. And God made all kinds of trees grow from the ground. Trees that were beautiful to look at and good to eat. The tree of life was in the middle of the garden, and also the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God took the man and set him down in the Garden of Eden to work the ground and keep it in order. God commanded the man, "You can eat from any tree in the garden, except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat from it, for in that moment, from that tree, you're dead." And God said, "It's not good for the man to be alone. I'll make him a helper, a companion." So, God formed from the dirt of the ground all of the animals, all of the birds of the air, and he brought them to the man to see what he would name them. Whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. The man named cattle, named the birds of the air, named the wild animals, but he didn't find a suitable companion. God put the man into a deep sleep, and as he slept, God removed one of his ribs and replaced it with flesh. Then God used that rib and made and shaped it to make a woman and presented her to the man. And the man said, "Finally, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, name her woman, for she was made from man." Therefore, a man leaves his father and mother and embraces his wife, and they become one flesh. The two of them, the man and his wife, were naked, but they felt no shame. Again, I invite you to take time to consider how this connects to your life. How does this speak to your life today? I invite us to moments of reflection with our same options as we share together in music. As we come to that point of our Lectio that is known as Oratio, it is the time where we respond. Now, when I think about this text, I don't know that there's a whole lot of responding that we've thought about doing. But it's a question that I think would bring good thinking to this text. How, as you think about this text, how does this text invite you to act differently? How does it invite you to act differently? At the time God made heaven and earth, before any grasses and shrubs had sprouted from the ground, God hadn't yet sent rain on the earth, nor was there anybody to work the ground. And the whole earth was watered by underground springs. And God formed man out of the dirt from the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man came alive, a living soul. Then God planted the Garden of Eden in the east. He put the man in it. And God made all kinds of trees grow from the ground, beautiful to look at, good to eat. The tree of life was in the middle, and there was also the tree of good and evil. And God took the man and put him in the garden to work the ground and to keep it. And God commanded the man, don't eat from the tree. You can eat from any tree of the garden, but not the garden the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The moment you eat from that tree, you're dead. And then God said it's not good for this one to be alone. I'll make a helper, a companion. And so God formed from the dirt. So God formed from the dirt of the ground all of the animals of the field and all of the birds of the air. And he brought them to the man to see that he could name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. And the man named cattle and birds of the air and wild animals, but he didn't find a suitable companion. So God put the man into a deep sleep, and as he slept, he removed one of the ribs and replaced it with flesh. And God used the rib that he had taken from the man to make another woman and presented her to the man. And the man said, "Finally, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, name her woman, for she was made from man. Therefore, a man leaves his father and mother and embraces the wife, and they become one flesh." And they were naked, but they were not ashamed. How does this text invite us to act differently? Again, our options for reflection and connection with God are the same. I invite us to a time of the The last piece of lectio is contemplatio, or contemplatio, contemplative and remaining in God's presence. And I invite us to complete our time together as we remain with God. I would like to share our song, Come and Fill Our Hearts with Your Love, once again. And then we'll share in a circle time. In that if you'd like to share something that comes from your heart that God has invited you to consider, accept differently into your lives, or respond in a way that you haven't thought about responding to this text, I invite you to share that. We'll share that out as prayer between our community and God. Let's sing together. I invite you to share as you like, as you feel led, as you remain and share in this time with God. What has filled your heart? What has challenged you maybe? What has given you comfort? What has made you wonder as you have heard this text from in this setting today? If you have art you want to share, you can do that too. But there's Judy going for the art share maybe.
I like the color in the lines, within the lines. But then I also wrote some words around the edge. So the word that first came to me was companion. And I thought it's the person that I live with full time. And right now it's son number 1. And then, no shame. No shame. And then naked in that ours, as we've actually grown a lot closer during this time. And we've bared our souls. So I think he can guess what I'm thinking most of the time. Don't have to say much. And I've learned so much about him. So I have discovered that when I just keep my mouth shut, we're better off sometimes. But in any case, it's been good. So a very positive feeling. The companion as opposed to the helper.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to share?
I don't care.
Okay, thanks. Go for it.
Well, I kind of got stuck on the phrase suitable companion. And that was the statement made after he had named all the animals. And a suitable companion mean that carrying it a little farther, for a man doesn't have to be a woman, for a woman a man doesn't have to see where people would go for that thinking. The suitable companion, can it be your trusted dog? Can it be your pet parrot, the fox chicken? Does it have to be a wife if you're a man? Does it have to be a man if you're a woman? Are there options there? This is kind of a lot. The other thing is that man didn't make woman. Sometimes I think growing up, woman was made from man. But God made man. God made woman. He just used Adam's rib to give the woman the humanness that was needed, I guess. Human to human. But both were made by God. So that's kind of where my mind went with this as we thought.
Thank you. As many times as I've read this text, I've always struggled with the language, the male and female language. And I read on Facebook this week, who knows what good comes out of Facebook. But one of the things that I read on Facebook this week that kind of struck me in relationship to this text and then kind of brought this text together for me this morning as I was thinking was that in the creation story, God made the statement that God created night and then God created day. And there's this definite night, definite day, right? And then you think about the gender issues, God made definite man and definite woman. And the thing that came alive for me this week off of Facebook was there's not really night and day. There's just all shades of light, right? There's all shades. There's all times. There's all capacities. There's all amazing beauties. In that transition or in that cycle, in that definition of night and day. And then as I think about the language that's used here is male and female, and recognizing that there's not really just male and female. I mean, we're all on that continuum, right? We all have male aspects, we all have female aspects, and we're like in this continuum, and there's beauty in that diversity. So there's not really a, night and day, male and female. There's the beauty of the diversity of who we are. And for me, this text, the earthling or the man, and, thinking about, I had to get past that man thing. But there's this aloneness. There's this aloneness. This person, this earthling, this man, this creation was alone. And God stuck him in this garden alone. And he was there to till the ground alone. And then God says, that's not good. I'm not liking this alone stuff. And so God creates everything else, and this person, this creation can't find it, right? And what happens? There's this community that's formed, and there's this, finally, I have found bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And there's this community that is developed. And the community isn't developed in the garden. That's not where the community's developed. The community developed after you're out of the garden. And the community keeps growing and growing and growing, and Adam and Eve in the garden could only be one form, but once you're out and you're set forth, there's just this amazing community. And then the concept of you and I belong together. Doesn't matter. You and I belong together. Joanna.
Well, when I first hear this,
Mm-hmm.
I have issues.
Well, of course we have. Yeah, go.
Lots of issues. I first see the oppression that is justified through this scripture. You know, man over woman.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
But the first reading, that was on my mind, you know, also going back to my agnostic self, you know, saying, wait a minute here. But still, the second reading was a little bit different, and the third a little bit more so, because then the thing that comes out of that is not so much gender as the unity of being. That the two came from the same source, and they return to that source, and they are one with another. They become one flesh. This kind of all kind of a different meaning of Unitarian, you know, of existence.
As we engage the text differently and more frequently, things change. As we rest differently, right? As we take our prayers to God, and as we open our hearts to what God brings us. And it's not necessarily the way the text has always been interpreted, which that's the dynamism of the biblical story. We engage it and we are different. Go ahead, Linda.
Quick comment on what you said about God created day and night, and perhaps the lens of the person who actually wrote those words didn't have it on their radar,
Yeah.
that it also included dawn and twilight.
Right?
And just a very quick reflection, I came away from this with a lot of curiosities. And one is that God didn't command Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree. He commanded only Adam.
Interesting, huh?
And, you know, maybe I need to check the news, but at any rate, so that was kind of like an interesting head scratcher.
Yeah.
It changes the dynamics of that situation. And why create a tree that you're not going to let them enjoy anyway?
And you know, it's a story, folks, right? It's not historical fact. It's a story. And stories have contexts, and stories have meanings, and stories are used so that you can get a meaning across that you might want to get across at that particular space and time. So you also have that historical context. It just opens up amazing opportunities. Well, thank you for exploring that text with me this morning. It is such a familiar it's such a familiar story, and we always hear almost the same interpretations, and we take it to gender, and we take it to, you know, man over woman and oppression, and we go all that direction with it. But there's other important things. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Finally, we discover we belong together. So as we come to the closing, I invite you to take this with you this week. I invite you to think about how God has invited you to be different in this text. I invite you to listen to God's leading And if it's not quite there yet, spend some more time this weekend, think about it. Mull it around, rest with it, walk with it, be challenged by it, be comforted by it, because this is the message that God has for you this week. Encourage it in your faith, your life of faith. Engage it in your journey of life. I invite us to share in our final musical piece, our postlude, our prelude, as we have said before, right? We leave here and our prelude to our lives together. Thank you.
You're not giving me our exercise here when I'm pulling the panel up.
That's all right, I found other ways to do it.
Oh, okay.
We're going to take our little dog down to the vet. The big dog, the little dog is like, she weighs 10 pounds. The big dog is between 25 and 30 pounds.
And you're trying to drive here?
No.